Today, we're looking at nonviolence, but maybe not how you usually think about it, not as just some passive, hopeful idea.
Right. The sources we're looking at, they use this term nonviolencia. It emphasizes active nonviolence. They frame it as a really high-level strategic political tool.
Exactly. So our mission today is to analyze two huge landmark resistance movements from the 20th century. We've got India's Salt March and Morocco's Green March.
And the goal is to see what their peaceful approach actually tells us about the praxis of peace itself, how it works in the real world.
Yeah, what makes it tick politically.
Because, when people hear nonviolence, the immediate thought is often, well, utopian, maybe even passive, weak, perhaps.
Right, like just letting things happen.
But we really need to challenge that idea right from the start. Our sources, they're quite clear. This is an active, demanding approach. It's a living expression of the praxis of peace, as one puts it.
A living expression. Okay.
Yeah, it's a calculated strategy. You're actively managing conflict. You're trying to transform it. And the aim always is to deliberately reduce human suffering.
And what I find fascinating, what we're really digging into, is why these two marches, very different contexts, different leaders, different continents, why they both got such significant political results, without firing a single shot. We're looking at how these actions, maybe implicitly, recognized the dignity of the opponent, even while they were fundamentally challenging, the whole structure of colonial power.
And to really get the strategy, you first have to understand the philosophy behind it. Where does this specific kind of active resistance come from? Its roots are quite global, actually.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the lineage here?
Well, you can trace a pretty clear path. It arguably starts or gets a strong modern push from Leo Tolstoy. He was incredibly inspired by Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, particularly that emphasis on love to enemies. This idea, this compassion, even for your adversary, it became foundational. And Tolstoy, through his letters, had a huge influence on Mohandas Gandhi.
Ah, the Gandhi connection.
Exactly. And Gandhi, he saw parallels between the Sermon on the Mount and the Hindu Bhagavad Gita. He synthesized these ideas into his core principles. Ahimsa.
Which is non-harm, non-suffering.
Precisely. Non-harm, non-suffering. And satyagraha.
Often translated as the force of truth and justice.
That's the one. But here's the crucial part. Satyagraha isn't about dominating or crushing the oppressor. It's about seeking the transformation of everyone involved in the conflict, the actors themselves.
That focus on transforming the opponent, not just defeating them, that's a massive shift in political thinking, isn't it?
It really is. And it wasn't just theory. This approach was put into practice, organized almost immediately.
How so?
Well, think about Abdul Ghaffar Khan. He was a contemporary of Gandhi, working in what's now Pakistan. Khan created the Khudai Khidmatgar, the Servants of God. This was effectively the world's first organized, nonviolent army among Muslim populations. They were deeply committed to social causes, yes, but also to zero violence. It proved this could be an organized, practical alternative, even in, tough environments with histories of conflict.
A nonviolent army, that's quite a concept.
It is.
Yeah.
And later, of course, you see this same kind of force being wielded by figures like Martin Luther King Jr. in the U.S. Civil Rights Movement.
Force of loving, he called it.
Exactly. And even Nelson Mandela, particularly in his approach after imprisonment during South Africa's transition away from apartheid, he embraced a nonviolent praxis.
Okay, but I have to ask this. For you, the listener, trying to grapple with this, how practical does this idea of love your enemies really feel when you're facing, say, systemic oppression? Real structural violence. The sources we looked at break down nonviolence into 5 core interpretations in practice. How do these sort of lofty ideals translate into something a mass movement can actually do?
That's absolutely the right question.
Yeah.
Because the sources show it's not just one thing. It's multifaceted.
Yes.
We can't only talk about the morality. We have to talk about the action.
Right. Okay. So 3 of those interpretations seem very external, focused on the conflict itself. Like it's used as a method of intervention. The goal is to lower the temperature, reduce violence, make space for dialogue.
Yes.
And it's defined as a non-armed struggle. So it's active resistance. You're pushing back against injustice, oppression, violence, but you always leave the door open for negotiation. You're not closing off talks.
Or crucially, there's the political dimension. It's framed as another way of doing politics. It's a strategy, a formula to get beyond political violence by consciously rebalancing power dynamics.
Yeah.
Avoiding the need to kill your adversaries to achieve political ends.
But then you have the other two interpretations, which feel much more internal, focused on the individual participant. There's the introspective journey. This demands self-knowledge, self-control from people. That feels like a huge psychological ask for potentially hundreds of thousands of people in a movement.
It is. It's demanding.
And then the final, broadest one, the cosmovision. This idea that love and cooperation are fundamental human drivers connecting us to each other and to nature.
But see, that internal discipline you mentioned, that's exactly what makes the external political dimension actually work. It's the foundation. As one of the key thinkers, Mario Lopez Martinez, puts it, nonviolence isn't just a philosophy you nod along to. It's a mental behavior, a predisposition, even a lifestyle of active resistance.
A predisposition.
Yes, it has to be chosen deliberately, consciously. And the aim is always to decrease violence. It demands extraordinary internal control, that self-mastery, to achieve that external political leverage.
Okay, so with that foundation, this idea of deliberate, disciplined, active nonviolence, let's look at the first big case study, the Salt March, India, 1930. This is often seen as the global benchmark for civil disobedience.
Right. And the injustice Gandhi targeted was, well, brilliantly simple, but deeply felt by everyone. The British colonial government had a monopoly on salt production.
Something essential to life.
Absolutely. They taxed it, and they stripped Indians of their basic right to harvest their own salt from their own shores. Gandhi took this everyday necessity, salt, and turned it into this powerful symbol of justice and freedom.
And the action itself was quite a spectacle. A 240-mile walk from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi on the coast.
Just imagine. The physical endurance, the commitment required for that alone is staggering.
Yeah. And Jawaharlal Nehru, who later became India's first prime minister, he pointed out something crucial. He said the march's real power wasn't just about defying the British salt laws.
What was it then?
It was about creating national cohesion. It became this incredible unifying force. It brought together people from different regions, different religions, different castes, precisely because they shared this commitment to nonviolent action.
That power, that ability to mobilize and unify, it directly led to Gandhi conceptualizing the Shanti Sena.
The peace army.
Exactly, the peace army, a nonviolent alternative to traditional military forces, designed specifically for conflict resolution based on these principles of truth and compassion. So the Salt March wasn't just about resisting colonialism, it was creating a whole new way to think about political organization and power.
Okay, now let's shift gears quite dramatically. Different continent, different context. Morocco, 1975, the Green March. This wasn't civil disobedience within a country. This was a strategic move by a nation to reclaim territory, the Western Sahara, which was then under Spanish administration.
That's right. And this action, it came out of Morocco's long struggle for territorial integrity. You have to remember the colonial period, the way Africa was carved up after conferences like Berlin and Algeciras. Morocco felt parts of its historical territory were unjustly separated.
And there was an international legal dimension here too, wasn't there?
Crucially, yes. Just before the march, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, issued an advisory opinion. It recognized that there were historical, juridical bonds and loyalty between the Sultan of Morocco, the king, and the tribes living in the Sahara. This gave the Moroccan claim significant international standing.
So this wasn't a spontaneous grassroots protest like perhaps some might imagine. This was a carefully orchestrated, sovereign action led by King Hassan II. And the scale, it was just breathtaking.
It really was. Over 350,000 unarmed civilian volunteers mobilized. Think about that number, unarmed civilians.
Incredible.
But the real genius, strategically speaking, was in the specific instructions King Hassan II gave the marchers on November 5th, 1975, just as they were about to cross the demarcation line. This is where it becomes a masterclass in nonviolent political praxis.
What were the instructions?
He told the marchers, and this quote I think really captures the essence, "Dear people, tomorrow you will cross the border. If you meet any Spaniard, civilian or military, greet him and invite him to the tent to share your meal."
Wow. Just wow. Greet him and offer him food.
Exactly. He essentially weaponized hospitality.
Yeah. That instruction instantly reframes the entire encounter. It turns a potential military confrontation, an invasion scenario, into, well, human interaction, it forces the Spanish soldiers on the other side to see these people not as an invading army, but as fellow humans offering food.
Precisely. It was a calculated strategy. The aim was to prevent bloodshed at all costs, to avoid any kind of belligerence, and to achieve the political objective, the return of the territory, through moral weight and diplomatic pressure.
It put Spain in an incredibly difficult position, diplomatically and morally.
It did. It was a sovereign, unilateral action, but one designed to circumvent armed conflict. And it worked. It forced Spain to the negotiating table almost immediately. Just 9 days later, on November 14th, the Madrid agreements were signed, transferring the administration of the Sahara from Spain to Morocco and Mauritania peacefully.
Okay, let's step back and compare these two then. We have the Salt March, civil disobedience, fighting for rights within a colonial system focused on salt. And the Green March, a sovereign state action, reclaiming territory, focused on land, the sand, both massive, both unarmed, both successful. What are the key takeaways when we put them side by side? What really proves this nonviolent approach as a superior political strategy?
Well, the sources highlight about 5 key comparative aspects. But maybe the overarching insight is this. Nonviolence, when done strategically like this, isn't passive at all. It's actually a very aggressive political maneuver in the sense that it forces the opponent, the oppressor, into a morally and politically crippling position.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. Aggressive nonviolence. How does that play out?
Okay, first look at human dignity. Both movements, in their own way, insisted on the inherent value of the opponent. They refused to dehumanize them.
Like the instruction to offer food in the Green March.
It's exactly. Or in India, the discipline of the protesters who endured beatings from police without retaliating. By doing that, they implicitly followed Kant's idea, treating the other as an end, not just a means. They challenged the moral grounds for the opponent's violence or oppression.
And if the oppressor meets that nonviolence with violence?
Then their own violence, the direct violence, the structural violence of the system, the cultural violence that justifies it, it's instantly exposed. To their own people, to the world. They lose the moral high ground.
Okay, that's dignity. What else?
Second, the historical context is key. Both were fundamentally anti-colonial struggles. They were fighting against the yoke of colonialism, which involves, as peace studies scholar Johan Galtung would say, all 3 types of violence simultaneously. Direct violence, like police brutality, structural violence, unjust laws, monopolies, and cultural violence, the ideologies that legitimize colonialism.
And these nonviolent marches tackled all 3 at once.
Yes. The march itself was the direct action challenging the physical control. Defying the salt monopoly or crossing the border to reclaim land attacked the structural injustice. And importantly, by unifying diverse populations, different religions in India, different tribes acknowledged in the Sahara context under a shared peaceful goal, they directly attacked the cultural belief that only violence brings political power or national unity.
That makes sense. What about the motivation?
Third, motivation. Both were driven by a deep yearning for emancipation and justice, whether it was freedom from the salt tax or the recovery of what was seen as sovereign territory. And significantly, both leaders invoked something akin to Gandhi's satyagraha, that force of love or truth.
Gandhi explicitly, and King Hassan II through that call for hospitality and peace.
Precisely. Fourth, the methods. Critically, as we've said, neither march involved firing a weapon. They achieved national unity despite internal differences, ethnic, linguistic, religious, because the unifying factor was the shared commitment to this nonviolent political action. That discipline was key.
And finally, the results.
Yes. Fifth, the achieved results. Both movements led directly to the vindication of the rights they sought. The dismantling of the salt monopoly's grip in India, though independence took longer, and the transfer of administration in the Sahara. They demonstrated that nonviolence isn't just a moral preference, it's an effective political strategy for achieving concrete goals.
Okay, this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. The sources connect the success of these nonviolent strategies to some pretty deep philosophical ideas, specifically Edgar Morin's principles of complex thought. How does that link work?
Yeah, this is fascinating. Morin's ideas help explain why nonviolence can be so politically powerful.
Yeah.
Take his dialectical principle. This suggests that opposites, like the colonizer and the colonized, or the marcher and the soldier, can actually enter into a dialogue, find some kind of consensus, or at least transform their relationship through interaction. Nonviolent action forces this interaction in a way that violence often prevents.
So instead of just conflict, you create a space for potential understanding or change.
Exactly. Then there's the recursive organizational principle. This is the idea that cause and effect loop back on each other. In this context, the nonviolent action, cause, produces a reaction from the opponent, which then influences the next nonviolent action, effect looping back as cause. It forces a continuous adaptation and transformation in the political dynamic itself. The oppressor can't just rely on the usual script of violent suppression.
It breaks the usual cycle of violence breeds violence.
It attempts to, yes. And finally, Morin's hologrammatic principle. This is the idea that the part contains the whole. In terms of humanity, every individual, the part, reflects the whole of humanity. Therefore, any action taken against the adversary, any violence inflicted, is in a sense an action against oneself, against humanity.
So nonviolence becomes the only logical response if you accept that shared humanity. It validates treating the opponent with dignity.
Precisely. It provides a deep philosophical grounding for why nonviolence isn't just strategic, but perhaps fundamentally aligned with a complex understanding of reality.
So, bringing it all together then, what's the ultimate conclusion from looking at the salt in the sand through this lens?
Well, I think the core conclusion is pretty clear and quite powerful. Resistance to oppression, when it's guided by both the philosophy and the disciplined praxis of nonviolence, that force of love, that commitment to truth, is not only a legitimate way to seek change, but it can be an incredibly effective means of achieving lasting political shifts in sovereignty.
It really does represent, as the sources say, another way of doing politics.
It absolutely does. A way that aims to build rather than destroy, even in the midst of profound conflict.
And maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to really mull over is this. Reflecting on these examples, maybe the biggest hurdle in pursuing nonviolence isn't really about whether it works politically. The evidence suggests it can be highly effective. Perhaps the real challenge lies within the participants themselves. Can they cultivate and maintain that essential predisposition, that deep internal psychological commitment? Can they resist the primal urge for violence, especially when they're under extreme pressure, facing provocation or actual harm? The true revolution, whether you're marching 240 miles to the sea or walking unarmed towards a guarded border, might just be that internal discipline.
That commitment to a different kind of strength.
Exactly. A different, maybe harder, but potentially more transformative kind of strength.